You're tuned into the Growth Ceilings podcast, the show for builders, dreamers, and leaders ready to break limits and grow beyond what they thought possible.
Welcome to the Growth Ceilings podcast. I'm your host, Jim Lovelady, professional EOS implementer. EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. This show is about real conversations with leaders who have climbed through setbacks, decisions, and defining moments that shape the businesses they run today. Today, I'm joined by Alex Buckles, founder of Forecastable. He has built a respected reputation around account-based selling, partnerships, and the systems that drive better collaboration across revenue teams. His work has helped companies reframe how they approach their largest and most strategic accounts. Alex, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
And I will take a moment to thank you for your service. Both you and I share veteran status. You served in the Marines, I served in the Air Force. And again, thank you for your service.
You're very welcome, and likewise.
So let's get on into it. So what originally pulled you into account-based selling and revenue collaboration?
So I'll give you a little bit of background. So after getting into the Marine Corps, I've spent the last 20 years in enterprise sales at a variety of different companies, some small businesses, some large ones. I was in the SAP ecosystem and the Adobe ecosystem, both on the software side and on the professional services side. I would be a horrible SMB seller. I spend way too much time on any given account. I really enjoy the strategy around figuring out all the moving parts and the stakeholders and the buying committee and how do you beat out your competition in a really big deal. I just really enjoy that. And throughout my career, I just figured out that when I brought in partners to deals and I figured out how to, if I'm in a situation and it's financial services, I'm going to bring in this partner who I know will rock the room and impress everybody. And we won deals that way. And so now I figured out that after going through that, we've built a niche around helping other companies do just that, so they can make a partner pipeline more predictable and all of that good stuff.
You're a solutions provider, aren't you?
We are. We started out as a SaaS company in 2018. I was like, we're going to go solve all the world's co-sell challenges. And we built all this technology. And I thought I did solve all the world's co-sell challenges because this is exactly what I need if I were co-selling as an enterprise AE, my dream tech, and only to come to find out that nobody knew what the heck to do with it. So I went out and was like, we just need a services company to come in and handle all the change management and do all that stuff. And then I went out to all the sales trainers, all the big shops in sales training, and found out they don't really know much about partnerships or have tracks on that. And then I went to all the partnership professional, consulting firms that were out there, and they don't have the enterprise or mid-market sales expertise that's required to run these types of co-sell plays. And so out of necessity, I had to go build the methodology and all the services and everything around the tech because nobody else out there had the capability.
Probably even more so in your DNA, something in your background, something you have inside of you that you talked about being a resource to your customer. And it's a fascinating topic because as a coach, as a sales leader myself, I've coached that throughout my career. And there was something that came along that I recognized where if I could offer additional resources, I'm extending my arms left and right. If I could offer additional resources to a customer beyond my core solution that I might be selling at that moment, if I could be a resource to my customer, I clearly differentiate myself in that process and become someone that's relied upon, someone who's differentiated, someone who provides value. So when you said that, it kind of struck a nerve with me, and that I really dig that.
Well, thank you. And you're right. It is about becoming a resource to customers and maybe going an inch deeper. It's for me, the epiphany for me was we all know that buyers want to buy outcomes. If they could write a check and get the outcome they wanted without talking to a single vendor, they would. They don't want to talk to us. They have to talk to us in order to get the outcomes that they want. And so as we started selling the technology, or not selling the technology, I guess, and then getting into the services side of things, when we started focusing on the outcomes and how can I be a resource to my customers to deliver the outcomes that they want and de-risk this investment, that's what really shifted everything for us as a company.
I'm just going to tag into what you just said. I think oftentimes, and I follow what you're saying, prospects don't want to talk to salespeople. Why? Because they're not getting value in the conversation. They're not recognizing why this is a good use of their time, a good use of their focus. And if you become focused on being a resource to the customer, one, you become more interesting. Two, you become relied upon. Eventually, I created this triangle many years ago. At the bottom rung was what we call vendor. If you're a vendor to somebody, you're at the lowest level. You're not differentiated. You're basically competing on price, if anything. When you rise to the level of resource, you're relied upon. There's a value seen. You're differentiated. And then eventually, there's the tippy top of the triangle, the third tier, if you will. And I call that advocate. And when you become an advocate for someone, you know them on a first name basis. You might even know who names of their kids. You might get invited to a wedding. Who knows?
Yeah.
But the advocate, I've had this with employees working for me. When we walk into a meeting with that customer, that employee almost all of a sudden transitions into an employee of the customer. And
Yeah.
I've even had customers threaten my life if I ever do anything to the employee themselves, that they would come after me. So I say that in jest, but the fun part about that was seeing the value ascend to this level of advocacy. So it's really an interesting topic altogether. So where do you see the biggest breakdown in how companies manage strategic accounts?
In the breakdown of managing strategic accounts. So I'd say managing strategic accounts, there's a lot of things to talk about there. One, there's a lot of noise out there right now. And when you're managing a strategic account, and this is an existing customer. We're talking existing customer or net new. Any particular distinction there, Jim?
No, I'm just saying in general, but you can go with new.
Sure. On the net new side, when you're chatting about, strategic customers and things like that, it's all about if we're trying to break into an account, we all know that there's diminishing returns on cold outbound right now. I don't care what AI tool you have. I don't care how good your messaging is. You're still competing against all the rest of the noise out there. We even have trouble doing partner recruiting efforts for customers sometimes because you're subject to all the traditional cold outbound noise that everybody else is creating. And so if you're getting into a strategic account or you have a named account like that, it's, breaking into the account typically happens through warm relationships. Of course, you want to have your value story. You want to have something deeply rooted in customer outcomes. You've got to hone in on their priorities, all the typical like enterprise sales type of stuff. But managing a strategic account for me is something I do very differently now than I would have 10 years ago. And it's very partner centric, especially if you're a large platform company like an SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, HubSpot. It's like you have all of these customers, you have all of these partners and potentially even thousands of partners that each have a customer footprint. And when you look at that data and you use tools like Crossbeam to like pull up the data and say, where does everybody in my partner ecosystem have customers or open opportunities? And would I do something different in my approach to this strategic account if I knew where my partners had footprint? And the answer should be yes, 100% of the time. And so that's what I would do differently in strategic account wise.
So you've emphasized partnerships and co-selling. They're both powerful, but still underused. Can you give us your perspective as to why that's happening?
Variety of reasons. One, oh my gosh, I might go on a soapbox here. So why is it happening? One, it's like, we think back to 2021. I call it yesterday's party, and now we have today's hangover. Yesterday's party was, all this money, crazy valuation. Everybody could afford steak dinners and all the travel and expense, you could possibly imagine. And, even I, as a sales rep back then, was spending $10,000, $12,000 a month on my company credit card because if my company would allow me to be on site for every single meeting, I'm absolutely going to be on site because I win more deals that way. But now the way with customer acquisition costs going up, valuations going down, at least multiples on valuations going down, with multiples going down, it's like you've got to get much more efficient in how you grow with customer acquisition costs, retention, all of that good stuff. And so partnerships delivers the lowest customer acquisition costs on the planet. It just does, because when you go get a warm introduction, not only do you get from a partner into a customer account or a target account, you're going to close that deal faster. You're going to increase your deal size. Your win rate's going to going to be higher, and CFOs really, really want that. And on top of that, every single CRO and sales leader knows that their reps aren't getting the pipeline that they need, and there's this desperation for pipeline. Yet I still see some of my buddies that are out there now. They're like, yeah, man, they're having me do this activity-based stuff. I got to do all these dumb things every week. They get me no results, but I have to show my activity metrics. It's like, come on, guys, you can better use that time to go get warm introductions into partners and then do that cold stuff.
Let's dig into that a little bit. What frameworks have proven most effective for simplifying how revenue teams operate?
Frameworks for simplifying how revenue teams operate.
Yeah, you talked about the activities-based management and the burden that people feel in sales roles. What's more effective for simplifying how these teams operate?
I would say to simplify it through the lens of partnerships in general. I would say the best thing any company could do is to create some type of centralized co-sell orchestration layer. And what is that? Well, at the end of the day, let's say you're running Crossbeam. Jim, are you familiar with Crossbeam? Have you used that before?
I have not.
Seen that with your clients?
Why don't you define what that is?
Sure. So like, hold on one second. Let me write something down. So what is Crossbeam? So Crossbeam, so you think about it at the beginning of the year as an enterprise seller, career enterprise seller, let's say it's January. I used to call up my friends in the industry and say, hey, I'm going to send you my account list. Why don't you send me mine? Let's take a look and see where, if we got some common accounts together, and let's see if there's any opportunity to go work some deals together. And that would happen at the beginning of every year. Well, Crossbeam decided that they went out there and built a they built middleware essentially. It sits between two partnering companies' CRMs that automatically identifies overlaps in accounts. So if Jim, you and I are partners, let's say we could be integration partners, tech companies. You go ahead and I open up an opportunity, and the Crossbeam just tells me that you already have that account as a customer. So instead of just running that opportunity, I might go to you first and say, hey, Jim, I noticed you already have them as a customer. I'm in a cycle with them, or I just closed this deal. What can you tell me about them? Can you tell me about their decision-making process? And, things like that. And so Crossbeam gives you the data across all these partners. And if you have hundreds or thousands of partners, that is a lot of data flow that's going back and forth. The challenge is that if you go just tell a rep and say, hey, let's say I'm going to use Adobe because I used to work at Adobe. Let's say you're an Adobe Marketo rep, and all of a sudden you get an alert that says, one professional services organization or an integration partner, has one of your name target accounts as a customer or an open opportunity. Most reps have no idea what to do with that information, and they ignore the notification and things like that. When in reality, going back to your point of like what framework would help them, execute this better. And that co-sell orchestration layer is the key component to that. Who's monitoring the Crossbeam data? When a new account overlap occurs, who's putting that in front of the rep in a meaningful way? Are we doing research first? Are we validating it's a real actual customer that they're in there? Or am I just booking 2 meetings between the AEs, of these partnering companies and making that happen? But just relying on the rep to go view data and hope they take the right action is a recipe for failure.
So that sounds like a misalignment to me. So what's the real cost of poor internal alignment?
The real cost of poor internal alignment is lost opportunity. I mean, it's literally just lost revenue, because at the end of the day, if you go through your name target account list and you've got 100 accounts and you start chipping away and prioritizing what you're going after, and you start with maybe some intent, you start looking at warm partner relationships and things like that, it just becomes really obvious.
So can you share a moment that reshaped your thinking on leadership?
Ooh, it's constantly reshaped. Maybe not like materially in any way anymore, but a moment that changed my perspective on leadership. So I would say that, for me, it's really about seeing what you don't want to be. You see good examples and things like that, but I've been through several situations in my career where, you see, you just get down to, I didn't like how I was treated in certain ways. And I committed to myself that I'm ever in a position where, I'm in leadership or I'm running my own company, that I will never do those things to my employees. And like, I live by that. I live and breathe by that every single day.
Yeah, I'm listening to your answer, and you make me think of one of the things we focus on with EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, where we teach 6 components of a business to make it healthy. There's the first component we call vision, and in that we define what we call core values. Yep. And as I'm listening to you share your experience where you were in circumstances that were not good, not healthy, I'm willing to bet people were not aligned on core values. They were hired thinking that, they may have been the right fit for whatever role they were hired for, but deep down, did they really truly embrace and understand the culture and the core values of the business? Did the ownership, did the leader of the company define that coming in so employees understood, hey, is this a fit for me or not? And oftentimes you learn a whole different perspective of people when you incorporate those core values into your interview process, how you terminate people, how you evaluate people, how you praise or give rewards to people, and connecting that back to your core values. So it's a really interesting thing, because that's kind of what led me to EOS, actually, being in a bunch of dysfunctional teams in my lifetime. And I wish I would have discovered EOS many years ago. It would have transformed my career, but here I am today teaching it. So it's important that we focus on those tools and help people get more out of their business. So let's talk about lessons that, from your perspective as being a founder of your company, what does every founder eventually learn the hard way?
Does every founder eventually learn the hard way? Man, it's a tough one. Every founder is so different. It depends.
Well, use your own experience.
What do you learn?
Yeah.
I would say, like, yeah, what are they going to learn the hard way? Man, I don't know. I can go through all kinds of hardships and things like that I've been through and overcome, over the years. But it's like one, it's all on you, good or bad or indifferent. Like it's on you. And like that self accountability is really, really important. And if you're not self accountable, you will fail. Period. At the end of the day, everything that happens within my organization, whether I was directly responsible for what that, for what happened in that moment, I'm ultimately accountable for it. And so I think, they're going to always learn that if they don't have that accountability, they're not going to win.
I'll share my own personal experience. Back in 2011, I was in quote unquote transition. And this is before the word fractional was used. So I started a consulting business called Demand Dynamics. And the solution that I put together was a combination of CRM, in this case, Salesforce, with
Yep.
email marketing software, where we could create a solution to produce lead generation for small to medium sized businesses. Oftentimes, sales leaders were given tools like Salesforce, and ownership would say, here, we just bought all these Salesforce licenses for you. Go out and make some money. And the sales leaders had no clue. There was no training. There was no guidance. There was no discussion around strategy. It was just assumed, hey, if I buy you Salesforce, go make some money. And I
Yep.
personally had been selling email marketing software going back 20, 25 years ago, and brought that together with CRM. So it was like chocolate and peanut butter. And pretty quickly, I was generating a nice chunk of change each month. I was doing about 25 grand a month with the clients I had started working with. So what did I do? And this is where what I learned the hard way. I brought on a bunch of people that I knew, friends of mine through business. I brought them on as employees to the company. Well, I quickly realized that was a mistake. I didn't have a business operating system to kind of bring everybody into, to organize the business, to have some structure, to define our vision, to get the right people in the right seats, to use data to measure our performance, to understand how we could predict both short and long term. And there's a whole bunch of other issues and process related issues that came out of all of that experience. So I learned the hard way, hiring your friends is probably not a good idea. If you've got a structure in place to evaluate them, to bring them into understanding with clarity what role and responsibility they're going to perform and what the expectations of that responsibility is, put into the form of some measurable or some metric that you can now track on a scorecard. Those are the kinds of tools that are needed to organize everyone so there's clarity, traction, and we all thrive. So that was my story. I think if I had EOS back then, this is going back to 2011, if I had it back then, it would have changed everything for me. So
That
all
that really
that said,
resonated with me because I had a mentor once that told me never ever to hire. Well, one, it's like never ever hire. So like build a role around a person because you're never going to be able to hire for that role again. And so, I've now and very much in the habit of I build the job description, the role and things like that. If that person happens to fit in there, so be it. But you've got to build the role first.
excellent. So where do you see revenue operations evolving in the next few years?
Revenue operations evolving. It's going to be a lot. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a whole lot different, candidly. I mean, there's, I used to sell Marketo. I used to run the revenue function at a marketing operations, consultancy that was, did large enterprise, RevOps types, managed services and implementations and things like that. And so I've been in that world like really deeply. And I still think it's all about the data flow and the management of all of that information. I know when times were good, going back to yesterday's party, again, when times were good, they bought every tool, every piece of technology under the sun because everybody had unlimited money, and so did your buyers. And then now there's this mandate probably happened a year and a half ago. It's like, hey, CFO's coming down, cut your tech stack. I don't care. Cut 50% of tech spend. Just figure it out. And then now I think people are being much more cautious with the purchases they are making as a result of having gone through that. And I think with AI and, I think it's taking all this data centrally, analyzing that stuff centrally somehow and getting insights is going to be the name of the game. It's data flow and insights.
So I'm going to share my screen with you really quick here, and I'm going to use this as a guide here. If a CEO brought you in to clean up their go-to-market strategy, where would you start? And the reason why I'm pulling this up is that this is the framework of EOS, but go ahead and tell me where you would start.
Would you mind making that a little bit bigger? It's a little blurry for me.
Yes. I'm sorry. There you go.
It got smaller and blurrier.
All right.
There we go.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to take this down. I'll try resharing it. Let's go back to you and I. But if blindly a CEO were to approach you and they wanted you to clean up their market strategy, where would you start? What does your first reaction come to that?
The first reaction is is one, what's working. And so the one word I did see on there was traction. It's like, well, where do you have traction today? What's working? What's not working? Just like real life in the field data points that we can then say, okay, well, if that's not working, we're not going to do that. If this is working, how can we tweak it? What are we doubling down on? What else do we want to prove that's viable? So I would start with what's working. And then jump to where do they want to go in terms of vision, and then what's the gap between what's working and vision, and just break that down.
Let me try this one more time. And for our audience, bear with me while I pull up this screen. I closed it, so it's going to take a moment to figure that out. I'll just articulate what I was going to try to share visually. It's the 6 components of a business, and what we teach with EOS is defining the vision. We use what we call the 8 questions. It's called a vision traction organizer. So again, defining the core values, defining your core focus. What's your 10-year vision? Where are you going to be in 10 years? It could be revenue-based, profit-based. It could be geographic. It could be number of locations, whatever. What does that vision look like? You could be selling your business in 10 years. You could be retired, living on the Gulf of America. You could be doing all sorts of different things 10 years from now. Well, what does that look like? And then getting into what's your marketing strategy? Who's your target? Who's your core focus in terms of your target audience, and what things define you? What's your passion, your niche for getting into what you do? And then from there, we define a 3-year picture. Where are you going to be 3 short years from now? And understanding what that revenue, profit, and the goals that you want to accomplish between now and 3 short years. Beyond that, we get into a 1-year plan where 12 months from now, what do we need to do to get there? And then finally, 2 more. One is called rocks, which are 90-day goals. And then finally, issues. How do we, as a management team, as a leadership team, identify, discuss, and solve issues so we can make them go away effectively? And I think that's what employees look for in their ownership, in their management. They want their leaders to solve problems, come back with solutions. And when you do that, you eventually get the business healthy and everyone's understanding who you are, where you're going, how you're going to get there. So just a little commercial there for EOS. How does that resonate with you?
Oh, it resonates with me. And in 10 years, I will be on the beach on the Gulf of America. That is happening.
Good. So let's get you out of here on this. What guidance would you give younger leaders who want to build a career in this space?
In sales and partnerships, and in which space?
Well, you've got a solution with your business. If you were guiding someone who's just getting started as a founder of a business, what would you give them in terms of some guidance?
In terms of guidance for a young entrepreneur starting the business, is one, just, you don't know anything, and like, be open to everyone else's, it's like, I walk into every conversation. I don't care what role they're in. I don't care if it's a janitor at the grocery store. If that person is talking to me, I assume that that person knows something that I don't know, and I listen. And so I think that constant curiosity and listening is something that is going to serve you well. And even when you're doing well, let's say you get to the point where you're doing well, I've seen some founders that get blinders on, and just because they're doing well, they stop listening and they've got their blinders on. And at the end of the day, you can still get punched in the jaw and you can still be surprised. And I always assume that something is waiting for me around the corner to punch me in the jaw. And I'm always keeping my eyes open. So that would be some initial advice for a young founder.
Alex, thank you for bringing clarity and depth to the conversation. Your perspective on revenue, collaboration, partnerships, and alignment is valuable. For those listening, thank you for spending time with us today. If this episode helped you, share it with a colleague who might benefit. More conversations with leaders like Alex are on the way. This is the Growth Ceilings Podcast. I'm Jim Lovelady. We will see you next time. Thank you.
You've been watching the Growth Ceilings Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's ready to grow.